Number 1. For 18 to 29-year-olds living in Western countries, such as the US, UK, France, Germany, and so on, there are, on average, 105 men for every 100 women. Now, a lot of you might be surprised that I had this as my number 1 statistic. But the reason I love this piece of data so much is because it is a direct counter-argument to anyone who still believes in this idea of there's somebody out there for everyone. This data is basically saying that even if we lived in a 100% perfect system, where every man and woman was able to find a partner and they were 100% satisfied with their relationship, even if this was the case, then still, every time, there would be a guaranteed 5 men who are left out.
Yeah, well, that's, everybody knows there's not someone for everyone. That's just something people say to people so that they don't have to have conversations about them being miserable the whole day or the whole night. You're not fun at parties when you're talking about miserable bullshit, so people just go, yeah, there's somebody for everybody. Yeah, there isn't somebody for everybody, and also everybody doesn't deserve love. That's something that people say too. Everybody deserves love. Absolutely not true.
And even then, it doesn't stop there, because you've also got to factor in that a large portion of these women aren't going to be the most ideal to date. So maybe they're single mothers, overweight, or maybe they're excluded from the dating market altogether, if they're more career or travel focused. But this is besides the point, because this data assumes that even if the system was perfect, and every match was ideal, then it's still going to leave some men left out of the dating market altogether. And lastly, before I move on to point number 2, if you want to know the reasoning for why this is, and why there are more men than women, is because in tribal times, men were much more likely to die during hunting or fighting other tribes. But by the time men and women reach fertile age, the numbers would usually be balanced out by that point.
Okay.
But obviously now we live in our developed world, there are no longer factors such as the ones I just listed to equalise the numbers. So that's the first statistic. There is a surplus of men, particularly for young age demographics living in the West. Moving on to number 2, height disadvantage. So taking a look at this chart, we have male height on the x-axis with the corresponding acceptance rate that women would deem suitable to date. And if we zoom in to a few critical parts of the graph, at 5'6", a man will have a 75% rejection rate based on his height alone.
Damn. And I'm laughing at this as somebody who's 5'7". Damn. 75% at 5'6", that's tough. That's tough. I guess, look, at 5'7", I would be at around 70% in terms of rejection rate off the bat before they even get to know me.
This is excluding other factors. This graph is based solely on height, and it gets even worse at 5'4", where it drops to 90%. This graph shows plain and simply just how significant height is for men when it comes to dating. And in my opinion, these numbers are likely even worse than what they appear. Because let's say that we bring 100 women back, and we have this man, he's 5'6". So, as already stated, 75 of those 100 will be an instant rejection for this man. But remember, these numbers, these are just the ones who said. These were just the ones who were honest in the survey, saying that they would reject a man at 5'6". What you've also got to take into account is others who lied in order to look good and virtuous.
Yeah, but if you think about it, though, there are also women that will say they'd rather be in the woods with a bear than a man. Right? It's just kind of shit women say. Like, I feel like when I go out into the real world, I know guys that are short that are killers. Like, I used to play rugby. There's a guy that I'm 5'7". He's shorter than me, so he got to be about 5'6", 5'5", and he's a killer. When we went to different countries, he would kill. So I don't know. I just have a hard time believing that the 75% rate and the 90% rate is actually correct. I bet if you ask the woman, like, just at face value, they'll just spew bullshit like they always do. Like, if you ask a woman their preference, of course they're going to say they want a taller guy if they could choose their perfect guy. If you ask a woman, how much money do you want your man to make, of course they're going to say some ridiculous number that they just think up off the top of their head because they're just talking shit, and that's your ideal. But when I look out into the real world, I see plenty of short dudes that got girlfriends. I see plenty of regular people that have girlfriends. I see plenty of broke dudes that have girlfriends. So I don't know. I just have a hard time believing, 75% and 90% of women just absolutely won't date a short guy with, no circumstances.
On top of this, you've also got to take into account any others who have a strong disdain or rejection rate for somebody who's 5'6", but would only consider dating him if he's massively making up for his lack of height in other areas, like having Tom Cruise tier face, status and wealth. But your average 5'6" man isn't realistically going to have these things. So really, the number of actual options that a 5'6" man will have is likely going to be significantly less than what the already shocking data shows. So that's number 2 about height. Moving on to number 3. Women, irrespective of their own ethnicity, favour white men when it comes to dating. So in this survey, women were asked which ethnicity they find the most attractive. I'll start by showing you this.
Not even going into this has got to be true, because when we would travel and go to different countries, I had teammates that would get on these dating apps that are also in other countries, and almost all the time, the white dudes had a far better rate of getting DM back and those different types of things. That's not surprising to me, though, because there's the lighter your skin is, the more benefit of the doubt you're going to get in every country. Even when I go to Africa every year for about a month, and I've been doing that for the past 4 years. Every time I go out there, the lighter-skinned people, and even white people, they get priority because they assume they have more money. So they'll give them priority and treat them nicer than some of the native people. And because when they look at me, they start speaking in Swahili because they expect me to know it because of my dark skin. And they're surprised every time when I tell them that I'm just American. But yeah, that's not surprising to me. I actually believe this one.
This is what the data would look like if your ethnicity had nothing to do with your dating life. If people were colourblind, as it's now commonly said, there'd be a completely even playing field, each sitting at 20%. Well, this graph, this is how white women responded. As you can see, the data is now heavily skewed. They in fact favour their own ethnicity by 86%, with others being preferred for roughly 5%. But I can understand this. I can see why it makes sense that one ethnicity will prefer to date their own. So based off this, you might expect other ethnicities to look something like this. So if you ask black women, they might respond this way, again favouring their own. Same goes for all other ethnicities. You'd expect the same pattern. But in reality, this is what the actual data looks like. Now this might seem a little confusing at first, but we have the female's ethnicity on the left and their preference rate on the bottom, and the bars are colour-coded. So if we go back to what white women rated earlier, you'll see on the graph that the orange bar for white men sits at 86%. And now what the shocking thing is, what stands out right away, is there is a hell of a lot of orange on this chart. Meaning most ethnicities, when it comes to preferences in dating, prefer to date white men. In fact, what's most shocking, in every case except for black women, they had a preference of over 50%.
Wow.
Meaning they preferred this ethnicity over all others combined.
Yeah, this also isn't a surprise to me. I grew up with a bunch of Hmong people. There are people from Thailand and Laos, for people who don't know. I believe so. I don't want to get that wrong, but I believe Thailand and Laos. But I grew up with a bunch of them, and I know they have a huge issue with Asian women dating white men. That's a big thing. Asian women are starting to not even prefer their own men. They're starting to date more white men, and they have names for it in their own communities to try to shame the women out of doing it. But now with the acceptance of interracial relationships in America especially, more and more Asian women are definitely dating white guys. Now, all the other races, I don't know as many people from those demographics, like especially Indian, Middle Eastern. Those are a little bit niche too. Pacific Islander females, I believe it, because when I played rugby, there was a lot of Pacific Islanders playing rugby, and they definitely had a preference for white guys. I wonder how much of this though is sexual though. Like, is it a sexual preference? Like, who would you want to meet up with to sleep with for a one-night stand? Or is this just about relationships, marriage, and wanting to start a family with guys? Because I think the new numbers might be a little bit skewed differently, especially for black men, if it's about linking up and just sleeping with them. Because I know that black men tend to be fetishized by a lot of different cultures. But yeah, for Asian guys, Indian guys, it's tough. It's tough. It is tough, so I believe this.
So there's that statistic. Moving on to number 4. A staggering 95% of Tinder likes go to just the top 50% of men. This shows two things. Number 1, hypergamy. It shows the vast majority of women, even those of lesser attractiveness, only have eyes for the top 50%. And secondly, it also shows the significant amount of looks discrimination that men face when it comes to dating. So if you're in that bottom 50% of men, which, for a man selected at random, will be a coin flip.
Right.
Then you're competing for that last 5%. This shows how severely the odds can be stacked against you.
I actually think it's more than a coin flip. I think that the vast majority of women think that the vast majority of men are unattractive. There could be a guy that's a 7 and a woman would just say that he's unattractive. I think that the vast majority of women don't find men attractive for the most part. And very few men actually get seen as universally attractive by women. I genuinely believe that. I think, status can skew it, height can skew it, all those different things. But yeah, I think it's more than a coin flip. I think that the vast majority of men to the vast majority of women are unattractive.
Almost entirely.
But again, this is one of those things where it's like, okay, these are on dating apps, or are these women that are just looking up to have sex? Because if a woman's going to have sex and be degenerate, she's going to choose to do it with the best guy that she can find, the most attractive guy that she can find, of course. So if this is just a dating website, which really ain't for dating, it's a hookup website, or a hookup app, of course it's going to skew towards the most attractive men, because the attractive dudes are going to be attractive to all of the women.
Based on your looks. If you've watched a lot of my content, you will know this is one of my favourite statistics to use. It's a great one to have at hand and can be used in many points of discussion. Next, number 5. Looks is the biggest indicator of a man's dating success. So if we take a look at this graph, on the left we have various attributes that make you attractive. So looks, personality, money. On the right, we have the rating of how strong each of these factors is for when it comes to a relationship initiation. And it's scored from -1 to 1. So the closer to 1 a factor is, the more weight it carries. And if it's below 0, it's undesirable. It actually makes your situation worse. So let's fill in the table. We'll start with what it's like for women. And the result should be fairly obvious. So obviously looks came in first. Everyone knows that men care about a woman's looks, and is a hugely significant factor for when a man is determining the suitability of a potential partner. So no surprises there.
Yeah.
Personality came second and money came third. Now let's see what the picture looks like for men.
And by the way, I think that's a big issue. I think that dating women based on looks, I understand it's important for guys because what we're attracted to is what we're attracted to. But if there's a woman that doesn't look as good as another woman, but she's useful, always go for the woman that's not a headache and useful. 10 out of 10. The looks are always going to go. So if that's what you're banking on, that's not the most important aspect. You want a woman that's useful. That's what you want. That's the most important attribute.
Now, on first guess, you might be expecting looks to carry much less weight, as most people assume that women care more about these kind of things when looking for a partner, a man's resources or his confidence and humour. But, in reality, this data shows when it comes to dating, looks is just as important, if not slightly more important for men than it is for women.
Yeah.
With looks carrying a strength correlation of 0.46 for men, which is 0.03 higher than it is for women. And again, a man's personality and money came in second and third. So that's the first 5. And
but that's another one of those things. Like, okay, is that for dating or is that for hooking up? Like, what are we defining dating as? Right? Because I know a lot of women that say, I only date rich guys, I'm the only one. But none of their ex-boyfriends have been rich and their baby daddy's broke, he's locked up. He's not rich. So, it's just a lot of that just nonsense. I think sometimes in these surveys, people will take what women say for face value in terms of their desires, and oftentimes it's just silly words that they make up and envision in their head since they were kids, and it's not real. But I understand, though. Looks are going to be important. I think it's important for maybe sleeping with women, but if you ain't got no money or stability, a woman going to get real ugly real quick. I'm going to say that. You might have an advantage from your looks for sleeping with women, but if you got a long-term relationship, you trying to have kids and a family, at some point you're going to have to provide. Every woman going to look for that at some point. I'm telling you, that's just the truth.
I think these are the most important, and they should be really easy to remember, because you've got one about demographics, and then you've got 3 to do with your appearance, split up into looks, ethnicity and height, and then you have one more to show its significance in dating. Anyway, that's the first 5. Make sure you like the video and leave any thoughts you have in the comments below so far, as it helps the YouTube algorithm. The next 5 are going to be a little bit more nuanced and have a wider perspective. Number 6, the halo effect. So if we have a look at this graph here, this is women rating a man's looks and personality out of 5. And notice how there is a very strong positive correlation. This is due to the halo effect, which is where people are more likely to attribute positive personality traits to somebody they already find attractive.
Yeah.
such as being kind, funny, and honest. Meanwhile, they'll likely attribute undesirable personality traits to somebody they find unattractive. Number 7. Women understate the importance of looks. So if we take a look at this graph, this is women rating men. And on the left is how important women said certain characteristics were, such as looks, personality, and money.
I actually think that last point was way darker than saying that women like looks for just like sleeping with guys or for dating, because then they're basically saying you're not even a good person if you ugly. To me, that's way darker. But I do think that like with personality, I think when you're attractive and people want you everywhere and people are embracing you everywhere because you're attractive and that's how people treat attractive people, you tend to develop a better personality because, at least on the male side, I've recognized, because you have more social interactions with people by and large. Like if you're the ugly duckling, nobody wants to really hang out with you unless you put yourself into those positions or those spaces. And so like socially, you might seem a little bit more awkward because people are already less receiving of you in the first place. But I think for guys, especially when you're more attractive, you have more social interactions. So you become better socially because people already want you around. So maybe it does have some correlation, but to say if you ugly, you got a bad personality too, that's kind of dark. I ain't gonna lie.
And on the right is how important they actually were. So how likely they were to lead to a real relationship. And what's most striking about this graph is the difference between how the stated importance to the actual importance is almost completely reversed. So if we zoom into the data, women said that the order looked like this, that personality was first, then money second, and looks third. But in reality, the actual importance was looks first, by a huge margin all the way up here, then personality second, then money third. Meanwhile, for number 8, when we compare this to men, they are much more honest on the importance of looks. So again, here's the graph for men rating women this time. And notice how they said that looks and personality were both highly important. Like obviously personality was top, but there isn't much difference, and they're more or less tied for first. Then money is at the bottom in third. Now although not perfect, it's a lot more accurate compared to the woman's graph. So when we put the two graphs together, and we focus just on the looks part, it is clear to see that men are much more honest about the importance of looks.
Well, yeah.
So the gradient is significantly steeper between women's stated importance and the actual importance, while men's is more accurate. And this concept is likely why so many men wind up in the friend zone, because they believe and they are told by women that it is their personality that's holding them back. And these men think that they just need more time in order to show their personality to that woman. So that's for men. However, you almost never see this the other way around, because if a man rejects a woman, the woman most likely knows that it's because of her looks.
With the personality thing, I think that personality does matter, but I think guys take it differently. I think when women talk about male personalities and like your personality being a hindering factor, they're usually saying you're soft. Like you're a friend, you're a buddy, because you don't have enough assertiveness. You're not demanding enough for a woman. Like women like to feel useful. Women like to feel useful, bro. I know that's contrary to a lot of people's beliefs and what they say they want, but women like to be useful. So when you have demands in your relationship and you demand that women reciprocate value for you to give them value, you're seen more as a prize. You seem more like because you're requiring something for you to do these things. If you don't require anything to do things for them, for these ladies, then they're just going to see you as disposable. Of course, they have nothing invested into it. Why would they? So to get them invested, you ask for favors too. You ask them to reciprocate value. If I'm doing this for you, do this for me. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Women will try to shame you out of having that standard for yourself, but as a man, sometimes it's about going against what women say and just standing your ground. Getting something for giving something. It's that simple. That's how I see it.
The world is made openly aware.
But usually, when ladies are talking about personalities and guys not having the right personality, it's because they are too much of a friend. They too nice. You want to sit here and gossip about other dudes to this girl, and she just using you as a shoulder to cry on. She going back to that dude. You look weak, brother. You look weak. You sitting here, yeah, he's a bad guy. You look crazy, bro. You're a friend. You're a buddy. She's not going to want you. She's not going to sleep with you, bro.
That men care about looks, and the woman will probably know that the man has hotter and more attractive options. Number 9, and these last 2 points are going to be more in respect to the wider world, and how your physical attractiveness affects you even outside of your dating life. And this data is that babies stare at attractive faces for 4 times longer than unattractive faces.
Damn.
So for this study, they held up an attractive face and an unattractive one. And for 80% of the time monitored, the baby stared at the more attractive face. And what I like about this statistic is that it shows the innate and subconscious bias that all people have when it comes to judging people based on their appearance.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, when you think of babies, they are often considered to be completely innocent and lack the cognitive abilities to be prejudiced. But still, the evidence shows that the preference for attractiveness happens subconsciously.
Wow.
People are less likely to want to be around you, be friends with you, do favours for you, if you're less attractive.
Yeah, I've heard about
Your
this.
attractiveness affects you so much more than just your dating life. And this brings me into my last piece of data. A man is over 6 times more likely to become a CEO at 6 foot or over.
Yeah. Well, that's
So these are my
believable.
calculations.
That makes sense to me. I remember reading something about presidents too. Almost all of them were above 6 feet tall. It was something like that because you're seen as more of an authority figure. It makes sense to me.
The Fortune 500, which is the 500 biggest companies in the US, the male CEOs have an average age of 59 years old. And 58% of the CEOs are over 6 foot. But unbelievably, just 9% of 59-year-olds are over 6 foot. So when you punch the numbers in, simply being over 6 foot gives a 6.4 times multiplicative advantage over sub 6 foot men. This concretely shows that your height is very closely linked to your status. You're more likely to be considered a leader if you're taller.
But it also shows that your age is too. Because of the older age of 59. I think that for guys, yeah, I remember when I was in white collar offices and stuff like that, they didn't want me to have a beard because they believed that a beard resembled wisdom. So unless you were older in the office, you weren't allowed to have a beard. Like that was a rule because you probably didn't know as much as your beard is saying that you know, and it was seen as a negative. So you had to be clean shaven and stuff like that. So it's not surprising to me. None of these things aren't surprising to me.
Get promoted at your job. Be put in more powerful positions. So again, just like your face, your height as a man affects you so much more than just your dating life. Anyway, these are my top 10 pieces of data. And as I said at the beginning, it is crucial that you learn these off by heart. They're all in simple categories, so they should be easy to remember. Anyway, if you really enjoyed this video, be sure to press the like button.
Okay, I'm going to leave the video in the pinned comments and in the description down below. It is Wheat Waffles top 10 data supporting the black pill, undeniable facts. See, the only issue with this is even if it is true, which I mean, I believe a lot of it. I don't necessarily think it's not true. I think sometimes you got to be careful when you're asking ladies their preferences because they'll just lie about shit, of course. But I don't. Here's the thing. Even if it is true, it doesn't benefit you to believe it. It doesn't benefit you to walk around the world with this type of mindset, especially if you fit into some of these categories where you're disadvantaged. It doesn't benefit you in any way to just kind of sit there in despair and not try to better yourself and get to the places you want to be. I don't see that as benefiting. It's okay to know things, right? It doesn't hurt to know that you may be disadvantaged. It doesn't hurt to know the things you should do in order to appear more attractive or to appear or to make more money or whatever it may be to sell yourself to ladies, like to promote yourself. But I don't think that walking around with a mindset that you're just unsavable is a good mentality to have in life in almost any category. Even if I think it was Andrew Tate, I seen a clip of Andrew Tate talking about going into the ring with a UFC fighter. He said, even if it was the best fighter in the world, I would have to believe that I'm going to win, because not believing that I'm going to win is just, it doesn't help me in any way. So if I have to do this thing, I might as well believe that I'm going to win when I'm doing this thing. So that's kind of my mindset about life. So I wouldn't, me personally, I don't think this is a good lens to look at the world, but it is what it is, to each your own. There are definitely undeniable facts in the video. Let me know in the comments below if this video was a W or L, and give me the HBO special. That's a help without special. Hit the like and the subscribe button for more content. Till next time.